Hello, it's Bethany, and I am a lower elementary Montessori teacher. And today, this afternoon, we're having like a parent information night about Montessori, where I'm going to talk about like a little bit of the history of Montessori, and then the plans of development for the parents, and then I'm going to set up like all of the math, all the language, and all the cultural materials so they can like go through it and see. So you'll watch me do that. Maybe while I set up, I will tell you my speech, my spiel about the two things I mentioned before, and then I'll go through the works that I lay out. Okay, so Montessori was an Italian doctor who saw something in her patients that she calls the human potential, which basically means that from a very young age, we can start instilling things in humans so that when they become adults, they'll be beneficial to society. So, after she practiced being a doctor for a few years, she went to a town in Italy and took children off the streets, and started to create these materials and observe them to see how they do and how they learn and what different ages need at the moment, which is how she also developed plans of development. So in these children, she noticed many things, but this was at the same time as Mussolini. And so at first he backed the Montessori method, and he thought, oh yes, this is great. We will have this schooling for different people. This is great. But then he realized she was trying to instill in the children independence, peace, and leadership. So he was like, nope, and he shut down all the Montessori schools in Italy, which allowed her to travel to India, where she even learned more about culture and more about different cultures and more about peace and what else she could do with the children. So then she started making her taking her method all over the world and teaching other teachers and everything. Her method of teaching. So that was a brief history in a few sentences. There are other things that you could explore and learn about her life, but for right now, that is the story, or her life, right? And so she developed these planes of development. So what that is there are 4 different planes: 0 to 6, infancy; 6 to 12, childhood; 12 to 18, adolescence; and 18 to 24 is maturity. So we'll start at the first plane because the majority of our students at this school are in the first plane of development. Some of their characteristics include some of their characteristics, so first I'll say, now I'm trying to think and put stuff out at the same time. So this is the plane of the absorbent mind, which means they're taking in what is around them. And how do they do that? They learn through the senses, which is why we have the sensorial materials that another teacher will talk about. And these sensorial materials help them learn through their senses. And what we're also trying to do is They love order. However you show them a presentation is how they're going to do that presentation. They're going to work on it that way. That's how they're going to work on it. And the shelves are in order so they see what's coming up next, right? And then we have the census order, and they're very rooted in reality. Whatever is in front of them is what they know. Their environments are what they know. And that is why by the age of 6, we try to teach them as many facts as we can, as many facts about the world, as much math as we can, trying to get all the way up through division concretely. It's a lot of concrete learning up to division. And then, because they're very rooted in reality and they're absorbing so much, we're trying to give them as many facts. And I say facts because here, also, before I move on to the next one, it is the physical and biological independence that they want. They want to be able to do things themselves. So as you see as you saw in your own children from 0 to 3, they grow a lot. It is dynamic growth. Because at 3 to 6, it's stable growth. They're consolidating what they learned from the first plane and using it, right, in the second with this stable growth. So, yes, okay, so it's physical and biological independence because they started at 0 and then they start to crawl and then they start to walk, they start to dress themselves, they start to go to the bathroom by themselves. All those things are physical and biological independence. So when we go to the next phase of the 6 to 12, we have the 6 to 9 classroom here, and I like that for Montessori because here's another dynamic growth. From 6 to 9, they're dynamically growing again. It's a great growth, a very great growth. And then in the 9 to 12, it's a stable growth again. And in this plane, it goes concretely to abstractly. So 6 to 9 is still doing concrete materials into abstraction, and 9 to 12 is the class with the most abstraction. But they still do have materials that they learn, things like decimals and different things on. So then, another key characteristic of 6 to 9 is imagination. And I know that the young kids have imagination and creativity, but this imagination means, okay, we knew what things were. Their desire in the 3 to 6 is what things were. And in the 6 to 9, it is, well, why is that thing? They have this great need to know why things are the way they are, as in, I learned about the planet in the pre-primary class, but in the lower elementary class, it's why is it a planet? They can imagine the space in their head of the different spaces between the planets. They can imagine and do concepts in their head without it having to be right in front of them, and that's what we mean by imagination. And the other characteristic is the age of socialization. So they love to talk and talk and talk. So we try to create the works in a way so they have an opportunity to work together and talk about their schoolwork is our hope. So, but they love to be social and they love to talk. And then the next plane is adolescence, so 12 to 18. And this is when they're very unstable, they're very emotional. They start thinking, well, what society does for me, how it helps me. Because in the next plane, 18 to 24, they start thinking, how can I help others? And we're trying to foster all the way from 0 how they will do well in their 18 to 24 plane, right? How we can instill peace, how we can instill independence, and how we can instill leadership. And the leadership part is very interesting because they have, if they stay through all 3 classes, like they start at 18 months to 3, they have this 18 months to 3 years old, they're the youngest in the class, get to the oldest of 3. And then again, when they move to the next class, they're the youngest again and get to 6. And when they're 6, they're the leaders in the class, they can help others. And then when they go to the lower elementary class, they're the youngest again. And then when they get to 9, they become the oldest again, right? So it's these 3 different chances for leadership and growth that instill like, hey, I am a leader. And it's the pattern of that makes it so unique. And also because of the characteristics are in like each chunk. So that is basically my spiel. I know it's quite an interesting thing. I'm going to lay out these materials and then show you. So after I gave my main speech, then I went through every single material you see for language, math, and cultural, And so for the language, I started from the little metal insets all the way to the movable alphabet, sandpaper, letters, movable alphabet, and then the pink, blue, and green series. And then I talked about the grammar symbols and the word study. Then for math, I start with talking about the red and blue rods, and then the spindle box. I point out how the trinomial cube is a squared plus b squared plus c squared, and how they see that in early childhood. And then I go on to all the numeration, starting with the colored beads, the teen board, 100 board, golden beads, and then I do math. I did addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, all the materials for that, math facts, and solving equations, and then fractions and geometry. And then I did the angular layout for the decanomial so I could show them how on the bead, the long chains, that it looks the same, and then they change the spine to the squares that turn into the cubes that turn into the pink tower. And then I talked about the history, geography, botany, and zoology we do, and I point out what they see in the early childhood versus what they see in the elementary. My speech, I went through it twice for all the materials because two groups went, like the other group went to see the practical life and sensorial in an early childhood classroom, and then they switched and came to mine. And I talked about the whole scope and sequence from that early childhood all the way up to lower and some upper elementary things. So that is what it is. I could go through and give you my whole speech in a different video if you want. That would be kind of fun, but it was a lot of fun just to lay out all these materials.